When I started working at Brennan Data Systems, I thought the graveyard shift would be peaceful. The building, a converted textile factory from the 1920s, sat in an industrial park where nothing stirred after midnight except the occasional truck rumbling past on the distant highway. My job was simple: monitor the servers, respond to tickets, and make sure nothing caught fire. Easy money while I finished my degree. My coworker was a man named Douglas Reeve. He'd been with the company for 17 years, all of them on night shift. Douglas was pale in a way that seemed almost translucent under the fluorescent lights, and he had this habit of standing perfectly still for long periods, just staring at his monitor without blinking. When I introduced myself that first night, he looked at me with watery gray eyes and said I would get used to the sounds. I didn't know what he meant until around 2 a.m. The building made noises. Old buildings do. But these weren't settling sounds or pipes expanding. These were footsteps. Distinct footsteps on the floor above us, which was supposed to be completely empty and locked. When I mentioned it to Douglas, he didn't look up from his screen. He said that was just Carol. I asked who Carol was. He told me she works upstairs. I checked the employee directory. There was no one assigned to the second floor. When I pressed Douglas about it, he smiled for the first time, revealing teeth that seemed too small for his mouth. He explained that Carol doesn't need to be on the directory, that she's been here longer than anyone. Over the following weeks, I learned Douglas's routine. He arrived exactly 15 minutes early every night. He ate the same lunch at 3 a.m., a sandwich that smelled faintly of vinegar and something else I couldn't identify. He never went to the bathroom. Not once in 8 hours. And he talked to his computer. Not normal talking like cursing at error messages. He had conversations. He would pause as if listening, then respond in a low murmur I could never quite make out. When I asked him about it once, he said he was coordinating with the legacy systems. The thing that really got to me was the photograph. Douglas kept it on his desk, facing away from where I could see it. One night, curiosity won. When he took one of his rare trips to the break room, I walked over and turned it around. It was a picture of our office, this exact room. But it was full of people, at least a dozen, all standing perfectly still, all staring directly at the camera. They were dressed in clothing from different eras, some in 1920s factory wear, others in 1960s business attire, a few in 1980s office casual. And there, in the back row, was Douglas. He looked exactly the same as he did now, not a day older. The photo was dated 1987. I confronted him when he returned. He set down his coffee, which I realized I'd never actually seen him drink, and smiled that too small smile again. He asked if I was wondering why he looks the same. My mouth was dry. I pointed out that the photo is almost 40 years old. Douglas corrected me with precision. 38 years, 4 months, and 6 days. He leaned back in his chair, and in the dim light, I could see something was wrong with his shadow. It moved independently, just slightly out of sync with his body. He told me the night shift is special here. He explained that Brennan built this place on top of something older, something that doesn't like to let go of its workers. The day shift, they come and go, living normal lives, but the night workers become part of the building. Carol has been there since 1952. Marcus I had heard him in the server. Room has been there since 1973, and Douglas started in 1987, thinking it would just be temporary. I stood up, my chair screeching against the floor. I told him he was insane, that he was trying to scare me. Douglas shook his head slowly. He said he was trying to warn me. I had been there 2 months, working 64 night shifts. That was the threshold. If I came back the next night, I would be there forever, just like them. Just like Carol upstairs, still walking her rounds. Just like poor Marcus, who died in a server rack accident but couldn't leave. I grabbed my jacket and ran for the door. Douglas called after me, his voice echoing in the empty corridor, telling me not to come back tomorrow, to find another job, any job. I didn't go back. I called in sick, then quit via email. I drove past the building once, about a year later, late at night. Through the window, I could see someone sitting at my old desk. Someone who moved with an odd, jerky quality, like they weren't quite solid. And standing behind them, perfectly still, was Douglas, teaching them the routine. The building is still there. They're always hiring for night shift. The pay is excellent, and they never ask many questions. The listing says long-term opportunity. They're not kidding about the long-term part.
Janet joined our accounting firm in March, right when things were ramping up for tax season. She seemed normal enough at first, quiet, efficient, always dressed in gray or beige. She had this way of appearing at your desk without making a sound, which startled people, but we chalked it up to soft shoes and carpeted floors. Then I started noticing the things she knew. It began small. She mentioned that I'd had car trouble that morning before I'd told anyone. When I asked how she knew, she just smiled and said she could tell by my face. But that wasn't it. My face looked fine. I'd checked. She knew when people called in sick before they did it. She'd set up their automatic out-of-office replies in advance. When confronted, she'd say she had a feeling or she'd heard them sniffling yesterday. But some of these people hadn't been in the office yesterday. One guy, Marcus, was working remotely all week, and Janet still predicted his food poisoning 2 days in advance. The breaking point for me came during a late evening in April. Most people had gone home, but Janet was still at her desk, and I was finishing up a client's quarterly report. I got up to use the bathroom, and when I walked past her cubicle, I saw her computer screen. It was filled with photographs, hundreds of them, photos of all of us, pictures taken through car windows in parking lots, pictures of us at home, visible through windows, pictures taken at restaurants, grocery stores, gas stations. There was a photo of me sleeping in my own bed, my window visible in the frame. My blood turned to ice. I must have made a sound because Janet turned around. She said simply, "Oh, you saw." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Janet stood up, smoothing her gray skirt, and walked toward me. In the fluorescent light, I noticed for the first time that her eyes didn't quite match. One was slightly larger than the other, and neither of them seemed to reflect light properly. She told me she was hoping to wait a bit longer before we had this conversation, but suppose now was fine. I managed to say I was calling the police. Reaching for my phone, Janet moved faster than should have been possible. One moment she was 5 feet away, the next her hand was on my wrist. Her skin was cold, impossibly cold, like touching frozen metal. She said I wouldn't do that, because if I did, I would force her to accelerate her timeline, and then all of us would disappear much sooner than she planned. I asked what she was talking about. Janet released my wrist and stepped back, tilting her head at an angle that was just slightly wrong, like a bird studying an insect. She said she was collecting us, all of us, this office, this company, these people. We were her current project. She documents everything, learns everything, and when she knows someone completely, inside and out, every habit and fear and secret, then they're ready. Ready for what? I asked. She answered, to be replaced. She smiled, and I saw that her teeth were too uniform, too perfect, like they'd been manufactured rather than grown. She explained that I might think she's Janet Morrison, hired through the temp agency, but Janet Morrison was in a car accident 3 months ago and is in a coma at Mercy General. She needed her identity, her credentials, her work history, and when she's done here, she becomes someone else. She's been doing this for a very long time. I tried to run. I got as far as the hallway before my legs stopped working. I collapsed, and Janet walked up calmly behind me. She told me the others were almost ready. I was always going to be last because I'm the most observant, the most likely to notice. But now that I knew, they would have to speed things up. She pulled out her phone and took a picture of me, lying paralyzed on the floor. The flash blinded me momentarily. When my vision cleared, she was holding up a printed photograph impossible, since she'd just taken it and comparing it to my face. She murmured that it was nearly perfect, just a few more weeks of study. The paralysis faded, and I scrambled away from her, running for the stairs. I heard her voice behind me, calm and patient, saying she would see me tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until she was ready. She told me not to bother running because she already knew where I lived. I didn't go to the police. Who would believe me? Instead, I started documenting everything. I set up cameras in my apartment. I changed my routines randomly. I never told anyone my plans in advance. But every morning, Janet is there at the office, smiling at me with that too perfect smile. And every evening, there's a new photograph on her desk. Sometimes it's me at a restaurant I decided to visit on a whim. Sometimes it's me in my apartment, despite all my cameras showing nothing unusual. Last week, another employee quit suddenly. David from HR. He left a resignation letter that seemed normal. But his wife called, frantic, saying he never came home. The police found his car in the parking garage, empty, with his phone and wallet still inside. Janet got a new photograph added to her collection. It shows David, but also someone else wearing David's face, sitting at his desk, doing his job. Yesterday, Janet stopped by my desk with coffee. She said I looked tired, that I should rest more. She would hate for anything to happen to me before she was finished. I'm writing this from my apartment, but I can feel her watching me. Every reflective surface seems suspicious. Every shadow could hide a camera. She's been documenting me for months, learning everything.
The mentorship program at Veritech Solutions was mandatory for all new hires, which is how I got paired with Raymond Delacroix. Human Resources presented it as an opportunity. 12 weeks of one-on-one guidance from a senior employee who would help me navigate company culture and advance my career. They made it sound like winning the lottery. Raymond had been with the company for 23 years. He worked in a windowless office on the third floor that smelled like old paper and something organic that I could never quite identify. When I met him for our first session, he shook my hand with fingers that were cold and slightly damp, and his grip lasted just a moment too long. He said my name, Hannah, rolling it strangely in his mouth. He told me he'd been looking forward to our time together, that we had so much to discuss. The sessions were held every Tuesday and Thursday evening from 6 to 7:30. Raymond insisted on this timing, saying the office was quieter then, better for focused mentorship. By 6 p.m., our floor was usually empty except for the two of us. He asked me questions. So many questions. They started professionally enough, my career goals, my educational background, my strengths and weaknesses, but gradually they became more personal. My family relationships, my childhood memories, my fears and dreams, my health history, the names of everyone I'd ever loved. I told him it seemed excessive. He smiled. Raymond smiled a lot, but his eyes never changed, and said that to mentor me properly, he needed to understand the whole person. He told me to trust the process. In week 3, I noticed the recordings. Raymond kept a small digital recorder on his desk, always running during our sessions. When I asked about it, he said it was for his notes, to review our discussions and track my progress. It seemed odd but not unreasonable, until I saw him listening to them when he thought I wasn't looking. He had headphones on, his eyes closed, mouth moving silently along with my recorded voice. His hands twitched in rhythm with whatever I was saying, like a conductor following a symphony. Week 5 is when I met the others. I stayed late one Thursday, finishing a project after my session with Raymond. Around 9 p.m., I heard voices coming from the conference room. Multiple voices, but they all sounded similar. Curious, I walked down the hallway and peered through the door's small window. Raymond was there, standing at the head of the table, but he wasn't alone. There were 6 other people in the room, and they were all doing the same thing, sitting perfectly still, hands folded identically, heads tilted at the same angle. They were all different people, different ages, genders, builds, but something about them was exactly the same. They were all moving their mouths in unison, silently forming the same words. And they were all staring at a projection on the wall. It was me, a video of me from our sessions, talking about my mother's death when I was 16. I ran. I didn't go back to work the next day, called in sick. But HR called me insistent. Missing mentorship sessions was a serious violation of company policy. If I missed more than 2, I could be terminated. The program was mandatory. Everyone had to complete it. I asked the HR, how many people had gone through the mentorship program with Raymond specifically? The HR representative said cheerfully that Raymond is one of their best mentors, that he's guided 42 employees over the years. Every single one has gone on to great success within the company. I asked if I could speak to some of them. There was a pause. Of course, she said. She would send me a list. The list arrived within minutes. 42 names with their current positions and office locations. I recognized some of them. I'd seen them around. They were always polite, always professional, always helpful. But now that I thought about it, they all had something similar about them. A certain quality to their movements, a particular cadence to their speech. I decided to test something. The next day, I approached 3 people from Raymond's mentorship list at different times, in different locations. I asked each of them the same question. What did they think of Raymond's mentorship style? They all paused for exactly 2 seconds before answering. They all tilted their heads at the same angle, and they all said, with minor variations, the same thing. Raymond helped them understand themselves better. He taught them how to be their best selves. During my next session, I confronted Raymond. I demanded to know what he was doing to people. He didn't seem surprised by my question. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers, another gesture I'd seen his former mentees use. He said calmly that he was helping them reach their potential. Most people are limited by their inconsistencies, their contradictions, their inability to maintain a coherent self. He smooths out those rough edges. He helps them become clearer, more focused versions of themselves. I accused him of brainwashing people, turning them into copies of something. Raymond corrected me gently. Not copies, refinements. He told me to think of him as an editor, removing the unnecessary parts of their personalities, the parts that cause doubt and confusion and pain. By the end of their 12 weeks together, they know exactly who they are and what they want. They're happy, he insisted. More happy than they've ever been. I said it was because they're not themselves anymore. He said no, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. He said it was because they're more themselves than ever before. The self they were always meant to be, without all the noise and chaos that consciousness brings. He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder with my name on it. It was full of papers, transcripts of our sessions, psychological profiles, detailed notes about my speech patterns, my memories, my relationships. He told me I was almost ready. Just 5 more weeks. By then, he would have collected enough of me to distill the essence. The core Hannah, without all the trauma and fear and doubt. He said I would thank him. I reported him to HR. They smiled and assured me they'd look into it. Nothing happened. I tried going to the CEO's office, but his assistant turned me away. Later, I found out the CEO had been one of Raymond's earliest mentees, back in 2001. I'm in week 9 now. I tried to quit, but my resignation was denied. Something about a contract clause I apparently signed. My lawyer looked at it and went pale, saying she'd never seen anything like it. The company can legally compel me to complete the mentorship program. The others watch me now. Raymond's 42 successes. They know I'm resisting. Sometimes I catch them standing in groups, all of them perfectly synchronized, all of them staring at me with the same expression on their different faces. Raymond's expression. Yesterday I felt it for the first time. A smoothness in my thoughts, like rough edges being filed away. I caught myself tilting my head at Raymond's angle. When someone asked me how I was doing, I paused for exactly 2 seconds before responding. I'm writing this as a warning, but also as a record. In 3 weeks, the program will be complete. I've thought about running, but where would I go? And besides, part of me, a growing part, doesn't want to run anymore. That part thinks maybe Raymond is right. Maybe I would be happier without all the confusion and pain. Maybe becoming a clearer version of myself wouldn't be so bad. That's how I know he's winning. If you're reading this after I've completed the program, don't trust what I tell you. Don't trust my smile or my reassurances that everything is fine. I'm leaving this document in my apartment, hidden where only someone looking for evidence would find it. Remember, I fought this. Remember, I didn't want this. Remember, whatever I become in 3 weeks, it won't really be me. It'll be Raymond's version of me. Another refinement. Another success story. Number 43.